Okay, let's talk about how to solve equations with perfect squares. When solving equations involving repeated factors, it is only necessary to set one of the repeated factors equal to 0. So, for example, if I wanted to solve 9x squared minus 48x equals negative 64, always start off by setting it equal to 0. Okay, then we could check, is this a perfect square trinomial? Well, the first term is a perfect square. The last term is a perfect square. So this would be 3x and this would be 8. And if you multiply the 8 and the 3x, you would get 24. Double it, you get 48. Since this is a minus 48, it is a perfect square trinomial. So it would be 3x minus 8 quantity squared. Now 3x minus 8 quantity squared is the same as 3x minus 8 times 3x minus 8. Since that factor is exactly repeated, it's the same one, you only have to set the one 3x minus 8 equal to 0, because the other one's going to give you the same thing because it is the same thing. Then if you add 8 divided by 3, you get 8/3. All right, here's a couple for you to try. Go ahead and pause the video. Okay, we're back. So the first one can be thought of as the a squared is quantity a squared. 36 is 6 squared. If I do 2 times a times 6, I get 12a. So it is a perfect square trinomial, and it factors into a plus 6 squared equals 0. And then that would be a plus 6 times a plus 6 equals 0. And then I could do a plus 6 equals 0, subtract 6, and you get a equals negative 6. And that's your answer. Okay. All right, next one. Y squared can be thought of as y squared. 4/9 can be thought of as 2/3 squared. If I do 2 times y times 2/3, you end up with 4/3 y, which is the middle term. But since the middle term is negative, I know it's going to be the square of a difference. So it's going to be y minus 2/3 squared equals 0. All right, which is y minus 2/3 times y minus 2/3. Since it's perfect square trinomial, the factored form is just the repeated factor of y minus 2/3. So you only have to set one of the y minus 2/3 equal to 0 because the other one gives the same thing. Add 2/3 and you get y equals 2/3. And we're done. Okay? All right. So you've solved equations like x squared minus 16 equals 0 by factoring. You can also use the definition of a square root to solve the equation like this. If I have x squared minus 16 equals 0, I can add 16 to both sides, then take the square root of each side. But here's the trick. When you solve an equation and you take the square root, you have to account for the positive root and the negative root. Because when you square a negative, you get a positive. So x squared equals 16. 4 would work because 4 squared is 16, but also negative 4 would work. So when you take the square root while you're solving an equation, you have to account for the positive or negative. And you can express it as plus or minus 4. Now, to solve a quadratic equation of the form x squared equals a number, take the square root of each side. Don't forget about the plus or minus. Okay, in the equation x squared equals n, if n is not a perfect square, you need to approximate the square root, and you can do that with a calculator. If n is a perfect square, you can have an exact answer. Okay, so let's check this first one out. If I have y squared minus, or y minus 6 quantity squared equals 81, notice it's something squared equals a perfect square. If I take the square root of both sides, the square root of y minus 6 squared is just y minus 6. Square root of 81 is plus or minus 9. So I like to think of it as y minus 6 equals 9, or y minus 6 equals negative 9. Then you add 6 to both sides here, and you get y equals 15. That looks like an 8. Y minus 15. And then if I add 6 here, you get y equals -3. Okay, and that's what they had here. I just thought that it looked a little bit weird. So this one, same thing. X plus 6 quantity squared equals 12. If I square root both sides, I get x plus 6 equals plus or minus square root of 12. Now 12 is not a perfect square. Okay, so you just use your calculator. If I take my calculator out, so the plus or minus, if I would have x plus 6 equals square root 12, and x plus 6 equals negative square root 12. Okay, then here you'd subtract 6, and you have x equals square root 12 minus 6. Here you subtract 6, and you'd have x equals negative square root 12 minus 6. Now when you're on the calculator, be careful. You're going to do second square root of 12. Make sure you close the parentheses, then subtract the 6. Otherwise, the calculator is going to think you're subtracting 6 inside the square root. And you get negative 2.54, like they have here. Then to do negative square root, you hit the negative symbol. Don't hit subtraction. Hit negative symbol, second square root of 12. Again, close the parentheses. Minus 6 equals negative 9.46, like they have here. The other thing you could do is figure out what the decimal is for square root 12 first. It's 3.46 if you round to 2 decimal places. And then use that, like do negative 6 plus 3.46 and negative 6 minus 3.46. Okay, that might be a little bit easier for you. All right, here's a couple for you to try. Go ahead and pause the video. All right, we're back. So the first one, you take the square root of both sides and you get a minus 10 equals plus or minus 11. So you have a minus 10 equals 11, or a minus 10 equals negative 11. So here you add 10 and you get a equals 21. Here you add 10, you get a equals negative 1. Okay. So this one, take the square root of both sides, and you would have z plus 3 equals plus or minus square root 26. Now what I'm going to do is, on my calculator, put in square root of 26, and it's 5.1. Okay, so z plus 3 equals plus or minus 5.1. So you have z plus 3 equals 5.1, and z plus 3 equals negative 5.1. So if I subtract 3 there, I'd have z equals 2.1. And if I subtract 3 here, I'd have z equals negative 8.1. All right, and there's my 2 answers there. Oop. All right. Okay. Last problem. During an experiment, as a ball is dropped from a height of 205 feet, the formula h equals negative 16t squared plus h naught can be used to approximate the number of seconds t it takes for the ball to reach a height h from an initial height of h in feet. Find the time it takes the ball to reach the ground. Now this is similar to the equation that we had for an object that was being thrown. So it was negative 16t squared plus vt plus h naught. The v stood for the initial speed of the object. Okay. Now in this case, the initial speed, if the ball is just dropped, it's actually 0. So that's why this term isn't here, because if you multiply t times 0, no matter what t is, you're still going to get 0. So that's why it's just negative 16t squared plus h naught, because the initial speed of the object is 0, because all they're doing is just holding it out and letting it go, because they just dropped it. They didn't throw it down or throw it up first. Okay? All right, so find the time it takes the ball to reach the ground. So at ground level, the height's going to be 0, and the initial height is 205 feet, so h naught is 205. So you have your original formula. Plug in 0 for h, Sorry about that. Plug in 0 for h and 205 for h naught. Okay? Because the height you want to figure out is at 0 and the initial height is 205. So subtract 205 from both sides, then divide by 16, and then take the square root of each side. It's plus or minus 3.6. Now, since this problem is talking about time, time can't be negative, so the answer is about 3.6 seconds for the ball to reach the ground. All right, here's one for you to try. Go ahead and pause the video. Okay, we're back. Find the time it takes the ball to reach the ground if it's dropped from a bridge that is half as high as the one described above. Well, if this one's 205 feet, half of that would be 102.5. That's going to be our h naught. So you would have h equals negative 16 t squared plus h naught. When it hits the ground, its height would be 0, and it was dropped from a height of 102.5 feet. So subtract 102.5, divide both sides by negative 16, and 102.5 is 6.40625 equals t squared. Then you take the square root, account for the plus or minus, and you get t equals plus or minus 2.53. So since time can't be negative, it's t equals 2.53 seconds. Okay? And notice that is not half the amount of time. Okay? And just a quick explanation as to why is if you drop something, gravity is pulling it down. Okay? So the longer it's falling, the faster it's going to go. So even though we cut the height in half, it's not going to go as fast as it would whenever you drop it from twice as high. So even though it took a little bit longer to drop from twice as high, it did not take twice as long because as it falls, it's getting faster. So the first half of the trip probably took 2.53 seconds when it was dropped from the 205-foot high. But the second half of that trip, it was going a lot faster, so it did it a lot quicker. So don't think you just cut the time in half. Okay? Alrighty. All right, guys. Well, that's it for this section. Please continue on to your assignment. And as always, reach out if you have any questions. Take care.